Hey, welcome back guys. Hope you're all doing well. In this video, we're going to continue to make some progress and we've got some updates on this beautiful Les Paul guitar kit from Precision Guitar Kits. Love this thing. We've got some decisions that have been made about the hardware, so we're going to finish that piece off for the most part, and we're going to get started on some of the sanding work, including these things come with a very minimal belly carve, which is pretty standard for a Les Paul, but there's no reason we can't go deeper, and for comfort purposes, we are going to go a little bit deeper there. So we'll do that probably in today's video. We'll get to work on getting this thing finished sanded and ready for paint. There's not a whole ton that needs to be done on these because they're in such, good condition. They're sanded so well and everything. So we're just going to do some final prep work with the sanding, maybe a little grain filling, and yeah, get this guy ready. We'll see how much progress we can make in today's video. If you haven't watched the prior videos in the series, you're going to wonder where we're at. So maybe go take a look and do those. But a couple quick updates. One, we are going to go with, unlike what I said last time, we're going to go with the Schaller non-locking tuners. They're really good tuners. The owner's decided he's happy with that. So in today's video, I'm going to go ahead and get the holes at the back of those drilled. So there's a little hole that where a screw goes to make sure that it doesn't move around, doesn't twist on you when you're playing. So we'll get that done. Oh, that's weird. I'm not going to make you watch me do all of them, but I'll put a couple in and do the rest off camera. We also have received, in fact, we received it before, the truss rod cover, which I think is custom from handcrafted custom inlay. So yeah, we'll get this positioned and get the little holes drilled that we need for this. And then it's a good thing that I didn't take a random jack plate. I said last time, oh, I need a jack plate for this. I don't appear to have one. It's a good thing I didn't do that because the owners actually decided to go with pretty much my favorite style, the insert, the recessed jack from Solo. And so I actually don't need to drill holes around it, and thankfully I didn't. I could have filled them, but thankfully I didn't because that plate actually recesses in there and the screws go in to the sides at an angle to hold it in place. So we don't need any holes in the surface. We're going to avoid that step entirely, and I don't need that in order to get started with painting, etc. Solo is going to send me one of those. If you haven't taken a look, that's where most of the hardware for this build comes from, and it's where I get most of my hardware from. So take a look at the link in the description. It is an affiliate link. It's the Solo Music Gear link or sologuitars.com. Okay, what else? Oh yeah, pickup rings. The pickup rings are coming. The order time on them is longer than I anticipated, but we'll get everything sanded, filled, ready to go, and I'll probably get the little holes drilled for those before we move on to the paint. We can even drill through the primer, no problem. What I can't do or don't want to do is drill through my clear coat at the end of the day, which is going to be a catalyzed polyurethane automotive type clear. It's going to have a beautiful sheen to it, very durable, but when you start drilling into it, because it forms kind of a hard layer, you risk getting cracking and peeling, and it can come off in chunks. So we don't want that. Drilling into something like an oil finish, a softer finish, not as risky, but with something hard like a nitrocellulose lacquer that's fully cured or a catalyzed polyurethane, you don't want to do that. So that's the explanation part. Let's get started on the work. Let's go. Starting with the easy part here, let's take a look at this custom truss rod cover. I haven't seen this yet. This is the back of it. That worked out well. It appears to be made of ebony. Oh, that's super cool. It's got like a custom little mother of pearl inlay. Really neat. So I'm going to take that out and get the holes drilled for it. That's quite large though. Let's see here. For some reason, and I often don't even bother with truss rod covers on my guitar. It's just not something that I often do. So for some reason, I feel like this is pretty big. It's quite shiny. It's got a nice coat of gloss something on it. Let's see how it looks on here. Yeah, I suppose that's pretty standard, isn't it? Really cool. Okay, so we can get that centered on there and drilled carefully. And go from there. Okay, we're going to do the rest of this in voiceover so I can save some time, speed up the footage. Otherwise, this will be a very long video. So what I'm doing here, I'm using a small precision ruler to find center on the headstock and of course using that truss rod cover to space out the holes appropriately, measuring those, and, well, setting the spot that I'm going to have to drill. And I'm using a little awl for that, just a little sharp tool. Then I'm positioning my tuning pegs, kind of the same deal here. I'm going to mark where I need to drill, and then I'm going to go in after with a small bit and drill everything. So I'm pressing those into place. I have already kind of widened out the holes that they go into to make sure that everything fits. It's not a bad thing to have a little bit of pressure that you need to apply. They're supposed to be in there nice and snug, but you don't want them in there too tight, especially when the time comes for you to do the painting. If you get a little finish in there, it's going to make them pretty much impossible to install. So make sure they're not crazy hard to press in. Now, once again, I'm using my awl, my marking tool, to put a little spot where I can put the drill bit. And then I've got a small drill bit that's jammed really far into the drill so it doesn't stick out very far, so I cannot drill through the headstock. I mean, I've never done it, and I assume I never will, but you take away the option entirely by making sure you've got that drill bit receded way in there and it's not a very long bit. I use that to drill both the back and the front here for the truss rod cover and the tuning pegs, and then those are good to go. Pretty straightforward stuff. Now I'm going to do the belly carve. I'm going to add just a little bit of a comfort carve to this thing. It, like I said, doesn't come with much of one, so nothing wrong with adding that. And when you're doing this, consider your body type, right? Some people will need a different, or I shouldn't say need, some people will benefit from a different depth and size of carve than others. And so, if you're built like a mannequin, maybe you don't need to do this at all. If a stiff breeze will blow you over, you probably don't need to. But hey, not everyone is like that. So, yeah, it's good to have the option to carve some away. So I mark how deep I want to go on the edge first. That's just how I like to do this. And then I mark how far onto the back of the guitar I want to bring that carve. The deeper you go, you don't want a crazy angle there for the most part if you're trying to do an actual ergonomic carve. So the deeper you go on the edge of the guitar, the further you want to taper that toward the back. Now, I don't have my setup yet. I moved into this place not all that long ago, although it's been a while, in fairness. But anyway, I don't have my my vise or anything like that set up to properly pin a guitar in place. So I have to make do with what I do have. I've got basically a shower mat there, a bathroom mat, which I use to make sure I'm not marring the surface, marring my guitar, scratching it, anything like that. And I keep it clean, and I avoid getting any kind of metal shavings or anything like that on it. It's just some sawdust now and then. So I'm working on that. I'm holding it with my hand, and I'm using a Shinto saw rasp that I got from Solo Music Gear. As I probably said earlier in this video, if you want anything from them, most of the tools that I use, most of the hardware, a lot of the hardware and some of the tools come from there. Solo Guitars is the website, or Solo Music Gear, and there's an affiliate link in the description. If you want to buy anything from there and you want it to help me out, please feel free to use it. So that's where I got this. It has what I'll call a rough side and a fine side, although neither of them are fine. This thing is for prompt material removal. And then I'm switching to a curved rasp to get into that kind of more curved part of the carve for a little bit. And then I'm going to move on to my sander. So there are a couple of key points to note here. First, the saw rasp is quite fast, which is nice. And it's also flat, so it's good for maintaining a flatter carve. Not every carve that you do will be conducive to that. Some you'll want a much flatter carve, and some you'll want a lot more curve to it. It depends on how you want to set up your angles. And so I like to start with the Shinto rasp usually, and then go from there with sandpaper. Now, you're not necessarily going to want to use an orbital sander like I'm using. You don't have to be incredible with an orbital sander to do this correctly, but you do have to be pretty comfortable with one, pretty good with one. A lot of times you're using only half of the sandpaper surface, and if you start resting the other half on the guitar, you're going to mess it up and stuff like that. So just something to be cognizant of. You do need to exercise care and caution when you're doing this. but it's certainly doable, and it's how I do a lot of my carving work. If I want to go deeper, I actually use a different kind of sander that's more aggressive, but for just a little bit of added comfort carve like we're doing on this one, the random orbital sander works perfectly fine. Of course, you start with a rougher grit like an 80 or 100 or something like that, and then work your way through the grits. And for something like this, we're going to end up at a 220 both on the carve and on the rest of the guitar. We'll cover the rest of the guitar sanding in the next video after we do our grain filling. So after I finish doing the bulk of the carve with this thing, I go in and kind of ease the edges a little bit, round them over a little bit for the transition to the rest of the guitar. And sometimes I do that largely with the palm sander, or sometimes I do it mostly by hand. Usually it's a combination of the two. I started off with the palm sander, and then I use my hand and my sandpaper to make sure that I've got a nice ergonomic transition there, something that feels good and smooth. You don't have to use your hand because this isn't a guitar neck, so it's not like it's your hand that's going to be going on it. But, feel your way through it. Make sure that the transitions are smooth and everything feels right. Alright, as always guys, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps me out. And yeah, don't forget to stay tuned for the next one. We do have another video coming up on the final prep work for this, and then we're going to move on to the priming and get going with the paint job. Thanks again guys. Have a good one. See you next time.